Is your mic on, Mr. Chair?
It is. It's only 7:59, so I won't pull out yet.
No worries. I was just making people aware we're being recorded. So therefore, the dirty limericks that Supervisor Rondon is saying, he'll have to stop.
Yeah.
There he is.
I'm not worried about him. It's a chair back there.
While Rondon does dirty limericks, Askey does dirty haiku.
Gary, there we go.
You're close, huh?
Well, okay,
We're a
we're
darn detour.
8
Keep
o'clock.
forgetting about it. Let's see.
8 o'clock.
Well, if you go fast enough, you're still okay.
I'm ready if you're ready.
You ready?
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. It's 8 o'clock. Is excused. And we have the minutes before you from the last meeting. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, the motion is on order to accept. Virginia, Tom? Oh, yeah, maybe we should, huh?
It's early. He hasn't had coffee yet.
Yeah, I didn't have any coffee yet this morning, or enough. All right, let's adopt the agenda first then, okay? Okay,
There you go. I like that efficiency.
like that. Okay, and Virginia had her hand up, so she seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. See, Dan, you're not the only one that makes mistakes. Well, I think I do it every day at least once. All right, I don't see anyone here from the public other than the sheriff, and the sheriff doesn't count. He's not public, he's just here. All right. The administrative report, monthly financial report, Paul.
Okay, we will start with contingency balance after last month's request and approval. We have 51,686 left, and nothing that I know of is on the waiting list or coming up. Sales tax received at the end of June for the month of May, 127,923. Year to date, there'll be 561,000. It is continuing to increase. It's higher than last year. Last year at this point, we had, oh, doggone, I just missed that here. 473,000 and change. So individual departments, I know that the coroner came up last month and the communication with him said it looked like it may be tapering off in May. As far as the general ledger goes, what's happening in May is still a little high. That wouldn't necessarily work its way through yet, but that's one we'll watch through the rest of the year. And if I had to guess, I'd say we'd be requesting some of that contingency to cover it unless things drastically change. I do want to point out that we have received our first half of the federal stimulus money, 1.98 million. Because of the nature of that one, I've set up a separate fund just for that. The reason being is going to be a multi-year process. It's a big dollar amount. We want to keep it out of our normal operations, and we'll have to identify and report back what eventually we spend it on. And the best way to do that is its own separate fund. So in the non-department area, you see there's a fund called coronavirus something. I just lost the name of it. And all that's in there right now is 1.9 million until something's decided on how to spend it. Right around this time next year, we'll get the second half of the payment. I don't know if I brought this up before, but there is also another new fund for the drug task force when it was joint with, and this I started at the beginning of the year. When it was joint with Door County, they had a separate checkbook that went back and forth between the agencies. Now that it's a Kewaunee County Drug Task Force, we have, again, a separate fund because there are other cities and the villages are also included with that. So everybody contributes, and then that pot of money goes toward the drug task force. And on a similar note, we have that pheasant exhibit at the zoo coming up. That one, we already have a fund for Bremer Park. I think we can run it through there. That building process should happen within a year. There's very little other things in that fund. I don't want to set up a fund just for that one-time thing and then have it out there forever and ever. So that one, we already have one set up, and we will run it through there, assuming it actually goes forward. Other than that, nothing new has come up for the individual departments. I just want to mention though that on my benchmarks, both for payroll, more so for the general benchmark, it's kind of a one size fits all, because with this system, that's the best I can do. And when we have something like 3 pay periods in April, it's gotten a little closer to the benchmark. Routinely, it looks like it's we're 1 or 2% below, and we're okay. The 3 pay periods make a difference because most departments, their biggest item is payroll. And earlier this year, instead of just doing a simple 1/12 for each month, I know that many invoices for January are actually paid in February, and February is paid in March. So I tried to incorporate that, and I may have maybe a little tighter. So it looks like a lot of them are a lot closer, and it may or may not be that because it's a one size fits all. So what I do then is I look at the individual departments that are closer. Most of them, it's the routine items. So that's as far as I have to go with it. But if you look at it and you say, hey, there's a lot of departments that are at or just over their benchmark, it may be that the benchmark is a little more conservative than it had been in previous years. But I still check the same departments. And if there's an issue such as a corner, then I bring it up here. That's all I have.
Scott, medical and dental.
Again, if you're looking through them, currently for right now for medical, we're about 6% above our premiums over claims. So we're running a little high this year. Dental, we're 17% over. Again, little high. And then for large claimants at this time, that's 50% or above of our stop loss. We have 8 folks that are there. I did have an initial meeting with Humana and Horton last week. So we'll be looking at approving any type of premium changes in September. We'll be getting information prior to that time. So that way, if the committee has any questions regarding possible changes to the health plan or anything that we may want to do in that respect prior to approving any type of percentage increase, then we can do that. I'll try to put together a summary for the July meeting, just so people are aware. In fact, we may have Horton come at the August meeting. So that way, if you have specific questions, then we can try to answer those as well. Again, if there's any questions regarding either of the loss reports, I can do that. Otherwise, I'll move forward to overtime. With overtime, again, as you can see, nothing particularly jumps out at this present time. Thank you. So in that respect, I think we're okay. If there's questions regarding overtime, then I can touch base on those as well.
Okay, let's move forward to number 7.
Certainly. To help move the process forward for the jail project, we had scheduled a meeting with Venture Architects. They brought along the Samuels Group, who does cost estimating, and we met with a couple of supervisors to just kind of talk about how we can try to move the process forward. I know that there had been some questions and concerns about what the facility would look like from a floor plan standpoint, and that phase 2 was more of a general design concept design, not necessarily floor plan. And so from the conversation, it was agreed that we could try to retain Venture Architects to do not necessarily a phase 3, but a phase 2+ in the respect that the Samuels Group and Venture Architects could start to provide us some more information that isn't to the detail that a phase 3 would be, meaning we don't need elevations, we don't need 3D renderings or anything like that, but instead it could give us a general floor plan or floor plans that supervisors could take a look at and ask questions to say, well, why do we have the laundry located here? Why is the Sally port there? Why do we have, and I'm making up the number, 4 holding cells in booking as opposed to 3? So that way, those discussions could really take place and be a little more granular, which could help to answer a lot of questions and address concerns that supervisors may have. But to do that, at least from a contractual basis, Venture Architects has fulfilled their contractual obligation with phase 2. And I know that there is anxiety or concern about moving fully on to phase 3. So to do a modified contract with Venture Architects not to exceed $19,500, we would first of all need financial approval from the county board. We could take that from contingency. That would be what's the right word? A valid or an appropriate use of contingency funds. And I know that the chair had asked that to keep the process moving along, that the item be brought before finance. So that way, from a financial standpoint, that box has been checked off and we can continue to move forward. If either the sheriff or Supervisor Baker or Chairman Olson wanted to add in additional comments, or if there's things that I'd missed, then I would be free, Mr. Chair.
This is basically, it keeps the process moving. There was obviously not agreement on moving to phase 3. However, there still is a lot of discussion about what we should do. There is a lot of interest in not letting it drop, but yet not enough support to jump to phase 3. This is kind of a phase 2 1/4, if you will. It does move the project or potential project. It moves it forward, but it does so at a pace that I believe the board will be much more comfortable with. And there's no disadvantage for us that I can see in doing this. This would everything that we would do in this small step would, if we then decided to go to full-blown phase 3, it would all go towards that. So I was very grateful to Mr. Kane, his willingness, and the representative from Samuel's group, their willingness to meet with us and to work with our county and to be amenable to the pace that we are able to move at, which may be different than other counties. So I think that it is an excellent step for us to take. And we're able to do so with simple finance approval. And we'll be able to do this simultaneously while getting cost, whatever the cost would be, as best we can for the current facility. That was information people wanted. I believe we should supply it for them. And then we can present and hopefully determine the path forward. So I would encourage the Finance Committee to approve this so that we're able to keep progress going and to be able to provide people with as much information as possible at a pace that they're comfortable with.
Mr. Chair, may I add one more thing? And again, with this phase 2+ or phase 2.25, the other point is that when we're talking about floor plans and the like, it may be the current design, it may be a different design. So The phase two, this new part isn't again locking us into what had been previously done. It is allowing for that design as well as other designs to be examined and discussed, which I think is probably an important part for a number of supervisors. From what I've been hearing is they feel like they're locked into possibly one design, and this work would allow for other designs to be examined and discussed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay,
Is this, in reading this, it looks like we're still going, instead of looking at 20 million, we're looking at 17 to 19. There isn't much of a switch there.
There,
We're also looking at, they're gonna readdress needs assessments and all this other stuff here. Don't we have all that stuff already?
we,
I mean, is this something? Let me go back to the subcommittee that's looking at this now. What are they recommending this to the finance committee, or how is this coming about?
our subcommittee hasn't met since then. Dan,
We-
go ahead.
we have not met since. It was necessary in order to, it was Supervisor Baker, myself, Mr. Felt. We met with the architect and the representative from Samuel's group, and in order to get this to finance and to be able to keep this on a kind of a fast pace, we felt that this meeting was coming, and we felt it best to go straight to this committee in order to keep it going. As for your questions about what it's accomplishing, well, some of the work has been done. That is correct. However, this is reevaluating and looking more closely at those needs. You are correct as well. The difference, the possible savings are not enormous. That was one of the issues that came up following the failure to go to phase 3. There were a lot of questions about the size and scope and whether or not some of this could be reduced. That will still be part of this when we meet with them, is to try to see if we can come up with a bit more focused project. However, no one should have any misconceptions. When we met with the architect and Samuel's group at the next, if this is approved at the next meeting, the jail inspector would be present. The jail inspector dictates a lot of this, and the jail inspector dictates a lot of what kind of reductions you would be able to make. That's just kind of the way it is. And so I think Supervisor Baker and certainly myself, I think Supervisor Baker included, we're a little disappointed that the kind of savings that might be able to be realized are not as substantial as we would have hoped. But we do have a clearer understanding of that now, and clear understanding of what a project would have to look like. I don't know, Supervisor Baker, what your thoughts were.
Yeah, so to address Tom's question, I think that whole space allocation was done, and it may have been shared with the committee, but I didn't have copies of it. That was a lot of my question was, what is the space being used for? What does the state require? What is the sheriff asking for? What are industry standards? I don't have that data. That was something I wanted to have before we moved into phase 3. That's what they're going to spend a lot of time, or the bulk of their time, telling us. The second thing that both Chair Olson and I asked for was, we asked for, what if we go to 45 beds or something significantly less than, can't we save a lot of money? And they told us, without looking at it, but they said their experience says, no, you can't get much below $18 million. So we were looking at cutting the project in half. So this will help us understand why that is the case. I would think that you could save more money, and I'm still got the question marks in my mind. I want to see how that space allocation adds up to so much money when you are saying maybe half the beds that we are asking for originally.
And again, these are things, these questions and what we would be doing are things that would be evaluated in a phase 3. So, I mean, this would roll over into it. I don't believe that we would be out anything, so to speak. Simply gets us, it simply takes a smaller bite out of, a very, very large item.
Is, you're talking about design and schematics and all this stuff that they're gonna possibly come up with. When we get, if this project moves forward, once we get to, what, okay, here's what we want and here's what we need. Are any of these costs going to be in some order duplicated? Because once we go to construction, we're going to have plans, specifications, all that other stuff. Is any of this stuff going to be transferable so we can avoid those costs? Once we get into the project?
Well, what we would be doing on this, what we would be discussing with them, yes, that would be transferable, because what we would be doing in this meeting is trying to narrow the exact project, what the project would look like. So it would certainly roll over into that. I mean, my opinion, after meeting with them at some length, my opinion, for what it's worth, is that this is eventually, and I think probably sooner than later, is going to go to the voters for referendum. I think that we will be able to demonstrate that we evaluated completely every option, that we pursued every possible savings for the taxpayer when it goes. And I think that we'll be able to say that with confidence. I do think that this is going to go to the taxpayers ultimately for referendum. And I think it's going to be a project that ultimately, even with our best efforts, is going to be in that $18, $19 million range. And the taxpayers are going to have to decide if they wish to accept that, or try to, continue with what we have. I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. I also think ultimately that we are also working at the same time. I know that Mr. Felt is working, we're working on ways with refinancing debt and other things to try to get the actual hit to the taxpayer reduced as much as possible, so that we can come up with a project that is as palatable as possible to the taxpayers and in the best interest of the county. So I believe that this step ultimately will not duplicate. I don't believe it will in the long run cost the county anything. I think the only thing that it does is it allows us to be able to move the project forward at a pace that the board will hopefully be more comfortable with.
Any other questions?
Just another question. Is there going to be, I know there are a number of issues that the subcommittee has been exploring as far as, fixing the current facility and various other items. Is there going to be any report to the board about what your conclusions are as far as all this stuff is concerned?
Yes, there will be. We do have a meeting we have a contractor coming in this Tuesday. We are trying, as you may be aware, contractors seem to have, they seem to be able to pick and choose what they want to do. There's more work out there than there are people to do it. So that, the suggestion that people aren't willing to come in because they know what they're going to get into, that's that's ludicrous. That is utter nonsense that has absolutely no basis in any kind of fact. You try getting a contractor to come look at the roof on your house right now. So that's a challenge. We are going to pursue that as fully as we can. And when we have those numbers and that information is as completely as we believe we can get it, that we are going to present that to the board. Whether the subcommittee will choose to make a recommendation as to, what direction to go, that will be something that the subcommittee will certainly discuss fully. I think ultimately, again, this is, I can't speak for the committee at this point. My opinion is that I think that ultimately, when we're all said and done, we will have that information and those costs and the pros and cons to present to the full board. But I think ultimately, the subcommittee, I expect probably will recommend going forward with a project to build. I think that's my opinion. I think ultimately, at some point, this has to happen. You know, again, it's kind of like my nearly 17-year-old Ford that I drove here today. I have a fresh roll of duct tape yet, you know, for the back tail light cover and things, and gotten a lot more years out of it than, you know, got a little more time out of it. But I also am not delusional. I do understand that at some point I am facing replacement, and on the jail, we should not be delusional. We are going to be facing a replacement. And I think there will be a difference of opinion as to when, but I don't know. I think it's probably getting to the point where the time is probably getting near at hand.
Okay. What is the committee's desires here?
I just have another comment on this. You know, I'm not opposed to, I understand what the issues are, but I'm just trying to cover bases that I think are important before we start spending more money. And I think one of them is a report from the subcommittee about all these issues with the current facility and a recommendation saying, you know, these are the issues. We're not going to we're not going to fix them and use the same building. We need to move to another facility. I think we should know that information before we start spending $20,000, $30,000 on more studies.
I think that the opinion of the subcommittee has been that we should be moving on both things simultaneously, but yet at a reasonable speed. This is not going and spending 160 to 180,000 if that's not the right project. What this is doing is spending $19,500 to make sure that to be sure of the project we want, while also being in a position where we would be able to go to referendum on the same schedule. I do appreciate Supervisor Romden's concern. The problem is that if we are just doing the one piece of it and looking only at the cost of repairs and not keeping the other option going, we obviously would be delayed, and I don't think that we would be able to stay on the desired or what was the originally discussed schedule for referendum. That would be that's a major part of it too.
Okay, Matt,
Okay.
you have a comment back there too.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to add, I want to appreciate the subcommittee and this group's willingness to, you know, continue to move this project forward. You know, we had some very good, lively discussions, but I do appreciate the input. I appreciate all the concerns and the perspectives. But to Chair Olson's point, we do have that potential fall of 2022 referendum as a mark. And I think we do have to do our best to walk and chew gum at the same time here, because we've got to really start backlogging that timetable. If we look at fall of 2022 and then, you know, backing that off, I think we have an obligation, as he said, to move in two directions at once, because I have no doubt that we're going to come to realization that any money spent on that existing building is probably not fruitful. And it would be a shame to hit that in the summer of 22, and then now we're up against the wall. So I appreciate everyone's willingness to kind of multitask on this one so we can kind of keep our timetables in line.
Tom, the one comment I'd make about that is that if we do get the data, which we're already working on for the existing jail, those costs, and we were to present it to the board, or even internal to the committee to discuss it, I think we need the other one as a contrast. what, because we have this one, so how does that compare with the best we can do with the new jail? Because I don't know of any other options that we're really entertaining right now. And so I think that if we're going to go back with a report, I'd like to be able to show both of them in contrast with one another rather than have just one and report back and they'll say, okay, we'll get us the other data before we can really decide any course forward.
Tom?
No.
Oh,
That's all I
I
have.
saw your light was on.
No.
Okay. So what is the committee's recommendation here? So
I make a motion to, is it from general fund?
From contingency.
From contingency, to approve the spending of the 19,500 to venture architects out of contingency fund.
we have a motion. Do we have a second? A second by Virginia. Discussion.
Is this something that has to go to the county board?
Being under 20,000, it does not need to go to the county board.
Any more comments? Hearing no comments. All those in
Just
favor?
one more question. Is there any reason why it can't go to the county board?
If the committee decides they want it to go to the county board, they can have it go to the county board, but they are not obligated to make it so.
Okay.
What is the date of that meeting, Scott? Is that even before the county board meeting?
The 19th is actually the day before the county board meeting.
Okay.
This committee has the authority. I would really hesitate. I can't imagine it failing at the full board, but that would sure put Mr. Kane and others in a bad spot.
All right. Any more comments? Hearing no comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carried. Look at that smile on his face. Oh, he ate the canary, I think. All right, moving forward, discussion of county fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the previous meeting, it was administration was directed to basically kind of identify the fees that that administration thought were worthy of discussion with the finance committee and possible departments. And so the memo that you have in front of you, which I had sent out, I believe yesterday, of the 11 departments where those departments actually set fees, there's only 3 of them that I believe that we should be taking a look at. One is the Land and Water Conservation Department, the other is the Highway Department, and the other is the Parks Department. And within the Land and Conservation Department, we have septic fees that on average are a little bit lower than our counterparts. Also, we have an inactive metallic mine permit that is significantly lower than our counterparts. I think that would be a good conversation to have with the county conservationist and any members otherwise. As for the highway, there are some counties that have an oversized and overweight limit fee and others that have a higher driveway permit fee. I did speak with Highway Commissioner Every, and he had informed me that the Transportation Committee did meet on that and that they had passed a motion that they believe that the fees are fine just the way that they are. Again, if the Finance Committee wants to have that conversation with the Highway Department, that is up to them. And just so you're aware, I did make all of the department heads aware of the fees that I had identified as to possible discussion. And then the third one is the Parks Department. Winter Park, their tubing and skiing fees. especially the tubing one should definitely be looked at for an increase. We could also be looking at the same thing from an ATV standpoint. But again, I am not recommending specifically anything at this point. Why? Because I think it's not fair for me to tell you what I believe the fee should be without you talking to the department heads and getting their input as well before I would make any type of recommendation. And so if it would meet the pleasure of the committee, I would have the county conservationist and the parks director to come to the July meeting to talk about those fees and any possible increase. If the committee did want to have the highway commissioner here to talk about those fees, he could attend as well. Again, the highway committee had already reviewed that and made the recommendation that there be no changes to highway committee fees. So not be it for me to therefore go against the highway committee. But again, if the finance committee would want to have that conversation, I would schedule that. And I do have highway commissioner is out of the office. County conservationist is not here today. I told her she didn't need to be, but because Dave is a glutton for punishment, Parks is here. If you have any questions regarding ATV fees or tubing and skiing fees right off the bat before July. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Scott, the way I heard this is that both Land and Water Conservation and Parks are not necessarily advocating raising those fees. You're just asking the finance committee to look at those fees.
I'll say it this way. I've had conversations with both the county conservationist and the parks director, especially with the parks director regarding the tubing fee. He understands my strong recommendation that the tubing fee be increased, and he is not opposed to that. Again, you can ask him directly. As for the ATV fee, that can probably be discussed. I am going to assume from the skiing standpoint, he would say leave it the way it is. And again, that's not necessarily a hill I want to die on. I definitely believe that the tubing fees need to be raised. And part of the reason why, one is for the amount of time that people are on there, you spend at least $10 to go see a movie. You can spend $10 to go tubing, but then also from a supply and demand standpoint, when Winter Park is operating, you have hour-long, sometimes hour and a half, 2-hour waits for the tubing hill, which tells me that the demand is there strong enough that if you were to raise the fee from, let's say, $8, which it currently is, to $10, I don't think you're going to see a large impact on attendance, as well as that is going to generate more revenue to cover the costs of operating that hill. So, and as for the county conservationist, I did have preliminary conversations with the conservationist, and that the septic fees could be raised because they are below average than neighboring counties. She isn't necessarily opposed to that, but again, I think it's important to have the conversation than to have it felt that this is just the administrator pushing a fee increase without any input from department or the committees.
But in your role, you're saying this is an opportunity to generate some more revenue. It is
Correct.
not the department saying we need, well, I'm sure they'd say they need more revenue, but they're not looking at this as something they would use as a vehicle for that.
And I would also say it this way, more often than not, and this is in no disrespect, but more often than not, you have county department heads that are looking at day-to-day operations. And then when they do look at fees, they look at it right at budget time, which is a more compressed timeline. And therefore, more often than not, they will do it just from their department standpoint instead from a finance standpoint, which is why I had scheduled for us to do a review of fees well before a budget season. So therefore, if there was some good conversation about whether fees should be raised or not, that there would be sufficient time for that discussion to take place.
Well, the way I'm seeing it right now is that you've identified for us a limited number of what, 11? What'd you say the number was?
Yes, 11 total departments that
No,
do
no, no.
fees.
You only have what, 3?
Only 3 departments,
No, 1,
of which
2, 3,
septic fees, there's about 5 of those.
You have 8 fees. You have 8 fees on here you're proposing that we look at.
Correct.
And none of the departments are advocating for it. I like the idea of looking at the comparable counties.
Mhm.
And I think that in the end, if we as a department or as a committee advocate raising those fees, I think it comes to those departments to argue why we shouldn't, as opposed to them coming here and explaining something they're not even asking for.
And either way, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. To me, the more important part is that the dialogue take place.
But can we go to the next step to see the comparative for the counties and what you propose or what anybody proposes for raising each of those 11? Or
Sure, the
8?
the comparables are in the packet that I had given you, but in July, what I can do is specifically give you the recommendation as to the increase or the new fee that I would be recommending, and then that conversation can be done with the parks and county conservation.
What I'd propose is that you get the data for just those, propose the new fee, send it to us. And if we agree with it, then give the departments a chance to respond if they think, hey, you shouldn't be doing this for these reasons. If they're not pushing for it, it really comes down to you and the committee pushing for it.
Gotcha.
I think that would make it a lot quicker than having them stand up here and tell us that they're not really an advocate for it. And they don't really think we need it. But in the end, we as a committee ought to be looking at whether or not we're keeping pace with the rest of the counties and generating enough revenue there.
So I'm going to repeat back what you said, Supervisor Baker, so that way I'm clear as to the direction is for the July meeting. What will happen is administration will identify the specific fees that I'm recommending that there be modification, i.e. increase, provide what I believe that increase should be, what that new fee should be, provide the comparable information from the other counties. And then from there, if there's any discussion or yes, committees would be invited to provide any additional information that the finance committee would like to have in considering whether to raise those fees or not. Yes?
Yes, I don't know why we wouldn't raise them if we're below the other counties, even the highway fees. I'm not sure why they would say, I don't advocate for raising them unless they're, is there some hidden penalty that the county would pay if we put an overload fee or something in there? That's what I don't understand.
Well, and to a certain degree, and to be completely transparent, Supervisor Baker, with some of them, it isn't necessarily that I have a strong recommendation, and I'll give a perfect example is the oversized and overweight limit fees. A lot of the counties don't have them, and those that do have it $50, $100. And so just from a consideration standpoint, I don't necessarily have a strong recommendation whether to do it or not. It's just I wanted this committee to be aware that there are other counties that do so, and therefore, if they felt it was something worthy, it would be worthy of discussion. There are others that I absolutely do believe that should be raised, and therefore would make that recommendation. And so part of it depends on how strongly I feel about a fee and whether it should be increased or not.
Gary, you're sitting there and contemplating. I know we talked about it at Highway. Just as a comment, Scott, on the overweight fees, I hold overweight fees as an annual from the state of Wisconsin. That allows us to go overweight on every highway in the state.
Mm-hmm.
It costs us $200 a year to do that. So, I mean, typically, you look at Calumet County has an overweight fee of $150. And I understand Calumet because of where they are. They have a lot of overweight loads in that county. Our trucks included. And most of the other counties, it's, they're just minimal fees, but even in the populous counties, they don't have a fee because, again, they're governed by, most of the roads are governed by the state of Wisconsin for overweight and even oversized. Oversized would maybe be more applicable for the sheriff's department because they get involved when they have escorts.
And you make a very good point, Chairman Massler, and that's why with some of these, it was more of just having a discussion than specifically having a strong recommendation. Again, when you look at the oversized and overweight, you've got Calumet, Winnebago, Oconto, Marinette, Shawano, and Washera, and I forget what the last one is, that have oversized and overweight load permits. Yet Manitowoc, Outagamie, Fond du Lac, Dorr, and Brown do not. And so therefore, do I believe that Kewaunee should? I don't have a strong preference either way. I just felt it was something that there may want to be a discussion. Again, so therefore I don't have strong recommendations with the highway fees because most of those that I'm talking about, some counties have it, some counties don't. And therefore the question is more philosophical, is should we start to have a fee or not? And that one becomes a little bit more, I'll call it political and philosophical, which I think the committee should take up. As for if there is an already existing fee, like with the septic fees, that they're about $25 less than our surrounding counties on average, while I feel I have a little more purview in making a recommendation because that's a fee that already exists. And I know that we may be splitting hairs here, but I try not to get into what is considered the legislative realm because that's why you guys get paid the big bucks. And instead, mine is more from an administrative standpoint.
If you look at some of these fees, the overweight fees are IOH fees, which are implement of husbandry, and that pertains to farm. And when you look at Calumet and Shawano, just for an example, it's more of going through an urban area. And so we felt Kewaunee County was more, these overweight limits are going through rural areas. So I think that's why Calumet has those fees. Possibly.
That may be the case.
So I'm not saying they're still running on county roads. I understand that, but it was not going through a city or per se.
So what is the mechanism where we get any kind of recoup of the cost when intense farm activity on some of these rural roads really damages the pavement? None?
Great question. I mean,
So
we're
is
trying
this a
even,
vehicle to get that back somewhat?
they're finding ways of getting around this. The state keeps raising the weight limits.
Okay.
So, every time we try to do something, I mean, if there's damage to a town road, we go after the farmer. And sometimes we're able to recoup some of that cost. Town roads are built a little bit different than county roads.
So, but this overweight fee would not recoup any of those costs for us, or it's just a drop in the bucket anyway?
No, it's just a permit saying you can do it and what you're doing. I believe, just for an example, they have what they call recovery tractors, which are extremely heavy. There's also fertilizer companies here in Kewaunee County that overweigh that, and they're legal to run.
And so when they damage the road, what is our way of getting any of that cost back? You said you go after the individual farmer to try to. pay
In a
it?
town, in our township, we do. Yes,
And that's the only way we recoup that.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, if you're charging $100 for a permit, that doesn't even pay for somebody to go out and look at the damage.
But that's our only way of getting it. I mean, long-term, what is the plan to address that? To make the roads heavier so you can tolerate that traffic? I mean, from a highway department, you guys must discuss this fairly frequently. I
Correct,
think that's.
correct. But we only
ongoing-
deal with county. We don't deal with.
Oh,
the
you don't
town
deal with
roads.
township roads or?
Correct,
Or
absolutely.
state, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to get some more information for.
Yes, I'll repeat again, is what I will do is for the parks and the county conservation is the committee wanting me to do highway, or because highway committee has already provided their recommendation, leave them alone? Otherwise, I will definitely do the parks fees that I've identified and the land and water conservation fees that I've identified, where here's what the current fee is, here's what I'm recommending, here's the additional county comparable information as well. So I'll do that just for parks and for land and water. Okay.
All right. Thank you much. Scott, why don't you just
Certainly.
take over 9?
The reason that 9 came up is that at our department head meeting on Tuesday, we had talked about some, I'll call it surplus stuff that we find in different places. In the basement, which we call the dungeon, which is a file room, there are times that there are bikes and furniture, a mattress, toys, and different things like that. And more often than not, they just take up space. I think what happens is we keep it, especially in the human services area, because we think that if we have that stuff and a family is in emergency need, well, then we have it. As well as we have office chairs that are slightly worn, or I shouldn't say slightly worn, they're worn, but they function, but they're beyond their useful life, but we keep them for parts or whatever else. And the thought is, well, as you well know, as when you put it someplace, and I don't know about you guys, but I have plenty of stuff in my basement that I've had for 20 years. And the only time I ever see it is when I move. And so the thought was we'd like to get rid of some of that stuff. And we were trying to go with what the policy was. And the question and the thought was, well, we do have a policy, which we do back from 1989, which says that, yes, you can get rid of this stuff, but if it has value, the county must try to sell it. And even if that means aggregating it together, if anyone's ever been to an estate auction where they aggregate it together and hope they can get someone to do it for can spend $5. While that sounds well and good, I think the resolution and the policy is good, there is one slight item that is difficult, and that is in the third one where it says, now therefore be it resolved that in the event any property other than scrap owned by Kewaunee County or any agency of the county is to be disposed of, it shall be offered for sale to the public. For those of you that have been around a while, it was a few years ago, a little bit before my time, when the county brought a bunch of this stuff to the fairgrounds and had people come and take a look and make bids, and the amount of time and effort that was done to do that in no way covered the cost of what we made. And while I am all in favor of trying to sell things that have value, the other part that I have a problem with is if we have an office chair, could we sell it on Wisconsin online and maybe get $2? Yes, but the staff time and logistics to do that far exceed what the cost is, what the revenue is that we generate. And so I guess, and I don't necessarily need it today, but it's something that needs to be discussed. I believe we should have some type of definition of what scrap means, because if we say from what this says, any property that has value, well, you can make a good argument that almost anything has some value. And again, the logistics of all those de minimis items and putting them together to get $10, we've more than paid that out in staff time. So, and I don't know if Paul has anything from accounting standpoint, but I just want us to have some more clarification so we can get rid of stuff instead of having to hold it, because we're going to have someone at the end say, well, that chair had value. Why didn't you sell it? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, Supervisor Victor.
Is the equipment that you're potentially going to need to get rid of in a place where the public could view it, even if it's inconvenient? What I'm driving at is, if it's inconvenient for the public to look at it, that doesn't mean they don't have the ability to look at it. I think that if we bend over backwards to get it out in an open space, we're spending a lot of money and not realizing anything. The neatest way I can see, and I saw this happen in a different place, is to just simply say, anybody who's willing to come in and go down and look at that pile of junk and wants to pick out something and put a sticky, say, I'll give you $5 for this, they're welcome to do that. And after 20 days, if they've got something on there and nobody else wants, you can come pick it up, and the rest of it just goes to the junk, and our investment is almost nothing.
I understand and I agree in principle, but in reality, I'll still disagree. Only in that if it's a chair, just the staff time of taking someone's time out of the day to have them show and go through the dungeon, even if we were to store everything out at the exhibition center for the $5, would not cover the cost of the staff time to go and show the public to do most of that. And again, most of our items are in what I would call a basement. Could we have someone come through? Yes, but I worry about staff time. And this is where it becomes really difficult. Why? Because it leaves it up to interpretation from a county standpoint, of which then there can always be the accusation that we're wasting or disposing of county resources that have a value, and that accusation does have a kernel of validity because there is value. The question comes down to, is that value equal to the time involved to allow that to be open to the public? And that's the difficult part that I wrestle with.
Why?
Scott, let me ask you this. What would your recommendation be to do to simplify this thing?
I'm going to say a number, but I am more than welcome to have Paul or someone else jump in here. $50 or more.
So if you feel it's worth $50 more, but what you've got
$50.
you're describing a basement full
staff
of
time.
a basement full of
I'm going
goodies.
on the low end.
And what you described is a basement full of goodies that basically I get to see every day of the week. Okay. And I'm going to tell you what, what you're describing is office chairs and mattresses and crap like that. I'm going to tell you what, you come on into my world and I can show you dozens of these things every day. You want your choice of chairs, I'll put them outside and you guys can come pick up and I'll let you have them.
But isn't this the intent of this, to meet the procedure? This is meant to not, to comply with a standard we already set.
Correct. It's to comply with the policy from 1989, and the part that is therefore not as clear is the definition of scrap.
Can I make a suggestion? Everything in this policy is fine except the definition. Just define scrap as anything where the cost to dispose of it exceeds the value you're going to get for it. And that covers everything without putting a hard dollar amount on it. You know, if things have value, we can bundle them up and put them on the website just as easy. But all these chairs that nobody wants for $1 and we're chasing around back and forth is what we want to try and not spend the time to get rid of all this little stuff. So if we define it as scrap because it costs more to get rid of it than we're going to get it, that will cover it without having to come back and say, well, what about $51? No, I would rather see it that way. And then we don't have to really change the policy because it covers small items, scrap, bundling. It doesn't say website, but it talks about sites, which we've already determined takes a lot of time. Our office actually lists vehicles and everything else on the Wisconsin surplus. And we have one person that does it. So we don't have to have 20 departments figuring out how to do the website, with the exception of tax deed property where Corp Counsel takes care of that. So we have that process in place. It works very well. We get a lot of people looking at it, but these little things are time consuming. I know we had an oven a few years ago. We got $15 for it, but between the department's time and Parks time and everybody else opening it up to view it, come get it, list it and everything else, we spent, I don't know how much, we spent more than $15 on that. Those are the kinds of things we want to just find a way to get rid of without spending an enormous amount of time just getting rid of stuff.
So this is not about perception by the public. This is more about meeting the intent of the policy, which
I'll be honest, it's a little bit of both, only because if we define scrap as it costs us more to put it together than to dispose of it, then we have a definition, because again, what may be my definition of scrap and Supervisor Poppy's definition of scrap could be different. And then ultimately I got rid of 20 office chairs over the course of a year. And I'm just picking on you because you're in front of my face, then he'd say, well, look, those all have value. You could have gotten, even at $10 a pop, you could have gotten $200. So why the heck did you get rid of them? And
well, I think we ought to ignore the perception, because we're always going to have outliers. I mean, if only one person knows about that oven, and after you've scrapped it, he says, I would have given you $100 for that, you've lost that battle. You're never going to win that one. I think what Paul is saying makes perfect sense. If it costs more to scrap than we believe we're going to get for it,
which is why I wanted a definition of scrap, because then that covers us from an administrative standpoint. No one can come back to us and say that you just didn't want to put in the effort.
Right.
Supervisor Haskell's been trying to get a word in on this.
Virginia.
Well, what I wanted to say is Kewaunee County Food Pantry does garage sales basically twice a year and take donations of stuff like this, and their money is used for Kewaunee County residents. If it's scrap like that, why don't we just call them and say, hey, come and take this stuff away, and they'll haul it away and it goes to a good cause.
And I'm fine with that as well, Supervisor Haskell. Why? Because then we don't have to try to sell it.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, our what's the right word? The amount of time that we have to put into it is minimal.
And yes, again, that's covered in the policy. If we have something that we can't sell for more than it's worth, and we say, organization, do you want it? Yes. Well, we've given it away now, and yes, we're scrapping it. You may be able to, or you as the organization may be able to find and sell something, but from our perspective, it's not. And this would still cover that. And yes, we discussed.
Yeah, because this way we're still giving back to Kewaunee County residents by having the food pantry have the money and do something with it.
John?
Yes.
As much as I appreciate the desire to make sure that we're not throwing any useful items away, heaven forbid, and I think we may have already spent more time on this than the whole thing was worth. This is a policy that is 32 years old, and it seems to me that maybe its time has come. Why doesn't this committee just consider changing the policy? It seems to me that this is the kind of thing that is a complete waste of staff time. I think that you could change the policy, and I would suggest as high as $500. That anything that doesn't have a value of $500 or more is disposed of in the way that the administrator or the staff or the department or who the world ever sees fit, get rid of it. Don't waste time on it. And, maybe Mr. Mastelier would consider donated dumpster that, he'd pick up free of charge when it was full.
We don't have that much.
I was serious on the previous part, though. As I know John's not donating a dumpster.
We're just not putting a dollar amount on it. If we, right.
I think with the chair, that chairman.
Yep.
You're suggesting is I thought where we were kind of drifting toward is a modification of policy to be clear with a dollar amount. So it isn't just a bag, it is scrap.
Yes, I believe it is. The chairman, Chair Olson just put a dollar amount towards what's the definition of scrap is. Mr. Kunish had just said, look, if the cost is more than what we believe the perceived value is, it's scrap. So
that doesn't get you, that still leaves you with a bunch of junk laying around. You need,
which is fine.
You need to liquidate stuff. Why in the world do we want to, it's going to look like Sanford and Sons around here if you're not moving stuff.
Your suggestion was not value, it was it's going to cost more to scrap it. We're not going to get as much to scrap in value as it's going to cost us.
Hi, Dan.
Maybe we could put a building up by the old landfill to store it.
If it's scrap, it's junk, so get rid of it.
Yeah.
Was this a resolution in the past because it was signed off?
Yes, it was resolution 45-12-89. It was passed on December 19th of
I
89.
remember when this one came up.
If we change it, it has to go back to the planning board.
Nope, this is no, because this is the Finance and Property Committee. Why? Because the Finance and Property Committee has the jurisdiction over this.
Oh, because I saw the signature on the bottom. I thought it was a county resolution.
Nope, it's a committee resolution.
Okay.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you fine tune what you suggest would be some language for the next meeting?
And remember, my junk is your treasure.
Then you know what? I am sitting on a treasure trove.
You wouldn't believe the treasures I have.
I'm sure.
And Virginia has got even more than me right now.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I think I have the
Okay.
direction of the committee and I'll have something prepared for July.
All
I
right.
mean, August.
You keep saying July.
It's only the second. I'm not used to it being so early in the month. So I
right.
apologize.
We have the vendor payments here, if you haven't checked them out online. And yes,
Why are they so low this past month? What it's about half of last month? It's only $700,000. 1.5, 1.6.
everybody was feeling generous.
Yeah, I mean, I track them every month. I mean, we were for the last 4 months, 1.4, 2.3, 2.2, 1.3, and then we're 720.
Probably because it's early. Which is second. Are
No,
there any?
no, it's a full month. I printed on the 26th, but we print checks on Friday, so there were no emergency checks Monday through Wednesday or whatever, Thursday.
Just seems weird.
I don't have an answer for that.
I thought maybe we were going to anticipate an extra heavy month in August then because something was out of sync. But
If-
hey, if we got a light month, that's good.
If we get high next month, you know why.
Yeah, it's true.
So, okay, we would need a motion for the approval of supplemental payroll.
Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the supplemental payroll.
Second.
Supervisor Baker and Ramdam. Discussion? Yes, I do. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Any other matters to bring up?
I do, Mr. Chair. Make sure I get where I need to be. Supervisor Romden had asked about the campground, so I wanted to give him the update. I had texted Haley Gillis as to how things were going, and I basically said, just checking to see how you two are doing. How is the campground coming along? She responded back, good, working hard. There's a million one things we're pecking away at. Have a lot of things happening midsummer, electricity for the site, expanding the pond, making a beach. The building should be taken down by the end of the summer. The bathroom shower house is going to be built, but with COVID, we have just been waiting on material and hoping that wood prices go down a little. So I wanted to follow up as to your request, Supervisor Rompin. So that's what I know at this present time.
I had run into Cody one day and asked him how things were going, and he said that we're pecking along. He says the problem they had, one of the big problems is all of 2020 with COVID, they couldn't get materials, they couldn't get contractors, prices are going up. So but I took it right out there. They've got it pretty well cleaned up.
Yes.
It looks pretty nice out there.
It's amazing what a mower can do.
What does the contract, I thought there was something where they had to be operational in a certain period of time. Is that correct?
There was certain that they had to make certain progress, and depending on how we get close, I would, at least from an administrative standpoint, and finance would have to approve it, but I would think that we could give them a little bit of leeway due to COVID kind of really putting a damper on being able to make some better progress than what they may have wanted to do previously.
Just from what it looked like before they took over to what it looks like 3 weeks ago, it's amazing the transformation that took place out there.
Okay. Next meeting would be August 6th. Is that good for everybody? Eight o'clock. All right.
Yes. Actually, Mr. Chair, I will broadband, because you talked about the July meeting. So there's a new wrinkle that is coming about, or may come about, I guess is the best way to say it. And I will actually name names because eventually the names become public anyways. Just a couple weeks ago and into last week, we were approached by Charter Communications, who actually does service in Algoma as well as Kewaunee. With the Rural Digital Opportunities Fund, which is RDOF, as well as the $100 million that Governor Evers had just put towards PSC broadband expansion grant. Charter has approached Kewaunee County about an opportunity and wanting to do a grant application with the county to provide fiber to the home in all unserved areas within Kewaunee County. The speeds would be up to a gig up and 500 meg down. They're trying to get us what the cost would be. They have not been absolutely clear, though the general thought that I had seen is that from a county match standpoint, that would be more of an in-kind than necessarily us writing a check. They will be getting us some information. The other part that in my conversations with them is there are certain unserved areas of the county that are within townships, town of Franklin, town of Carlton, the Dykesville area. There's actually a sliver in the Casco area. And I had told them, well, if you're wanting to do the unserved areas, I'd still like to know what the cost would be for you to do fiber to the home to those unserved areas in the rural areas. Because if we were to do just fiber to the home to those unserved areas and not provided to those islands, I think that there would be some definite concerns raised. That does not mean that we would abandon Bug Tussle. In fact, I had a conversation with Bug Tussle last week as well. I believe it was last week. And in my conversations with Mr. Schneider, he does not have an issue with charter coming in. Bug Tussle for the most part does middle mile, not last mile, which is what fiber to the home is. And he would think that this could be an opportunity that Bug Tussle and charter could actually partner, where charter could focus on getting the fiber to the home, and they could use Bug Tussle's already existing middle mile as part of the route to get there. And so in July, we may be looking at possibly 2 applications to be approving as a county, depending on how things go.
The only thing that Mr. Schneider seems to take issue with is he feels that charter should be treated the same as Bug Tussle, and charter took like money from us. That's the conversation before that you think that Mr. Schneider makes a fair point. Bug Tussle is their own money. That's why.
I don't mind loaning money to charter and making money on our money, just like we are doing with Bug Tussle.
Their proposal says they just want us to pitch in and we don't even get the money back.
We're not sure yet, but correct. And in previous projects, actually, and this is where Bug Tussle has been an amazing partner, is that with most of your broadband projects with other internet service providers, what has usually happened is that city or that county or whomever that partner is has usually put money into the kitty with no return. It's not a loan. It's not, shares of stock or anything in that respect. It's you're subsidizing this to make it happen. So, correct. They talked about it. So I just wanted people to be aware that this is still starting. I haven't gotten the cost estimates yet. I was supposed to get them last week. Hopefully I can get them by today. But this is an item for probably this important discussion at the July meeting. I'm sorry. Yes, July meeting. See, now I'm getting all my things. Yes, July board meeting.
So are you saying that spectrum of charter is their proposal is to get fiber to every home in the county?
Correct. At least to every home that is unserved. So for the cities of Algoma and Kewaunee and Village of Luxembourg, that would not be the case. And again, there are certain areas within the rural areas of the county that already have met the 25.3, so they are considered by the PSC as served. But again, in my conversations with Charter, I said I wanted to know what the cost would be to serve those, to install in those served areas in the rural parts of the county. Why? Because if town of Montpelier is getting fiber to the home and significant parts of the town of Carlton or the town of Franklin are not, I think that's going to raise the ire of certain supervisors as well as the public. Don't forget mics, please.
The second proposal from Bug Tussle would be in competition with Charter's,
I would,
or could be.
Could be if Charter wanted to do middle mile as well. Again, I have made Bug Tussle aware of Charter's interest, and Bug Tussle has described to us that they're not as worried about it for 2 reasons. One, they're predominantly middle mile, and 2, from a price point standpoint, Most of your charter is going to do a bundling of cable and internet and possibly even phone. But the service that you're going to get from charter is likely to be at a higher cost than what it would be from Bug Tussle. So from that standpoint, Bug Tussle is not as concerned, again, because they're focusing right now on the middle mile and towers, and feel that charter, if they wanted to, you could have a very good relationship where there's a partnership with Bug Tussle and charter, that charter would use Bug Tussle's middle mile and then just be able to focus their time and resources on getting the fiber from that middle mile to the home.
Okay. Any more questions, comments? Next meeting, July 6th, 8 AM.
August 6th.
August 6th, 8 AM. I'm sorry. See, I made another mistake already today. Oh, yeah, I tell you what. It's early too. All right, we need motions to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Baker, seconded by Tom. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Heck no, let's get out of here.
Mhm. It's the holiday weekend.